golden. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the organizers of this discussion for inviting us. I want to assure you that we in the real movement for democratic change do not take this for granted. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a serious issue on our hands today. There are some realities that existed before the making of this constitution. And these realities include, immediately after independence, we noticed black on black oppression. We noticed the discrimination among black communities. In other words, we noticed a form of black apartheid. There was political violence, starting with Gukura Hundi, Muramba China, the 2008 election runoff, and the murder, maiming of innocent civilians through state-sponsored violence. These were the realities existing in Zimbabwe. There was violence accompanying the land reform program. There were extrajudicial killings. We in the MDC in 2008 alone lost 300 youngsters, including Tondira Indira, Beta Chokururama, Godfrey Kauzani, Shepard Jani, and many, many others. We had in our country one center of power. President Mugabe did everything, appointed the judges, appointed the prosecutor, decided the life of parliament, even appointed members of parliament. That was the reality that we had. We had a conflation of the state, the party, and the military. The person you found in the Politburo was the person you found in the cabinet, was the person you found in parliament, was the person you found in the army. So there was conflation of the party, the military, and the executive. And I've already talked about the 2008 violence. Now, we decided to go for a constitution-making process. And this constitution-making process was in terms of an agreement, the global political agreement. And the constitution-making process was democratic, it was inclusive, and it was people-driven. So the product that came is a democratic product, an inclusive product, and a people-driven product. If you dare amend it using only one party, it is now a one-party document. Honorable Mangwana is correct that this document was a compromise document, taking into account the interests of all the communities. The effect of amendment of the Constitution on the basis that we willed two-thirds majority is converting it into a ZANU-PF partisan document, and that is not right. Now, my learned friend, I just want to answer him before I go to the actual amendments. My learned friend says, because they were voted in, the ZANU-PF, and by what they say, by the majority, they have the right to amend the Constitution. But here is a stark reality. The people who voted for ZANU-PF in 2018 did not vote for ZANU-PF to change the Constitution. They voted for ZANU-PF to change their lives, to bring jobs, to make sure that there was medicine in the clinics, to make sure that our people do not continue wallowing in poverty and misery. It was to make sure that the youths had a future in this country. That was the mandate. It was not to mutilate the Constitution as they are doubting. My friend, Honorable Mangwana is correct. A Constitution is a living document. But again, here is a reality about living documents or living creatures. They are capable of dying. They are capable of being killed. What ZANU-PF is doing is killing the Constitution, the living document, and they are making it a dead document. Well, popularity in a single election does not convert automatically into rationality. You don't suddenly become wise because you've been elected a member of parliament. We have members of parliament whose logic, whose abilities sometimes is worse than if you were in Kenya, I would say Wanjiku. Wanjiku in the Kenyan folklore is the lowest of the lowest women who are in the rural areas, they are not educated and so on. But they reason better than some of the people you see in parliament. What is this constitution doing? The constitution deals with, it removes the running mate. Ladies and gentlemen, Honorable Mangwana and myself, we are seated in one room to look at this question. And we looked at the succession problems within ZANU-PF. We looked at how the presidents were choosing their deputies. And we noticed that the presidents usually choose deputies who are not a threat to them. They would choose people who are more useless than them. So, the running mate clause, we wanted to deal with the smooth succession. It has to be automatic. If a president dies or leaves office, we have to know who's going to take over. But number two, because we said to the presidential candidate, tell us who your deputy is, a deputy president became an election issue, thus guaranteeing the quality of the deputy president. The second thing that we did, now what ZANU-PF wants to do is to remove that so that the president chooses the vice president after the election. And there keeps his colleagues and comrades guessing. And when it comes to succession, they are returning us to the lottery clause. And the lottery clause is that the last vice president who last acted becomes the acting president. Now that is manipulable, isn't it? Then the appointment of judges. We noticed that the judges who were being appointed were people, some of them were people who did not know their jobs. They were boys, they were friends, they were comrades. But we also noticed that these judges, especially the judges of the Supreme Court and the High Court, decide matters of life and death. They pass death penalties. We also noticed that they decide presidential petitions. So they decide if it is challenged who runs the country. So we wanted to make sure that Zimbabweans are satisfied of the quality of the people who will hold these matters in their hands. And we then said judges must be appointed following public interviews. What President Mnangagwa has now done is to take that power away. So judges of the Constitutional Court and the Supreme Court and the High Court are not going to be subject to public interviews. What do we lose by subjecting people to public interviews? It gives the judges the time to answer questions about themselves and to parade their knowledge. So far, our judges have been appointed using public interviews. We have not lost anything. Justice Malaba went through a public interview. Why should we now insulate other judges from going through the public interviews? Who do we want to appoint? So this is bringing back opaqueness in the judicial system, and we are against that. A prosecutor general, yes, we had said, again, a prosecutor general's appointment must not be simply by the president. There must be checks and balances. Now, according to this amendment, he is going to be appointed, he or she is going to be appointed by the president alone. Delimitation. We said we need to make sure that there is no cheating about the electoral boundaries. So there had to be factors to be considered. And we said one of the most important factors is population density. A member of parliament must represent a certain minimum of people. Now, delimitation must follow a population census, so that when they are doing their carving of the boundaries, they consider the correct population density. What ZANU-PF is doing in its wisdom or lack of it, what ZANU-PF is doing is that it is removing that. So the delimitation of the constituencies does not have to follow population density. So this paves way for gerrymandering, and they are preparing to rig, I'm sorry to say. Devolution, Honorable Mangwana and myself were agreed on this one. Devolution was an answer to uneven development. It was an answer to, it was an answer to, we wanted Zimbabweans to have a say in the development priorities of their areas. Now what ZANU-PF is doing is that it is removing the members of parliament from the provincial council, which decides the development priorities of that province. Why would you leave MPs? I do not know. Now, in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, constitutions are built out of the distrust of politicians. You make a constitution because politicians are not trustworthy, so you bind them. And it has been said, constitutions are chains that we make for ourselves in our moments of sobriety to bind us in our moments of madness. So we make these chains before we get mad, before we get drunk, mad with the power, drunk with the power. So it is a fundamental mistake that ZANU-PF is doing, changing the constitution because it is in power. So what does this constitution do? It retains executive and monarchical powers in the hands of the president. He is going to have more powers than Robert Mugabe. And I don't think that is a wise thing. And what this constitution is doing is that it is now formalizing the chief secretary to the president and cabinet. And many people don't see anything wrong with this. They don't see anything fishy with this. But let me tell you that what this constitution is doing is converting the chief secretary to the president and cabinet to a prime minister. So he, by all means and form, is a prime minister. And if my information is correct, the president and the secretary to the president and cabinet are related. So you have a president, a brother, the prime minister, a brother again. And we have now fossilized this into the constitution. We wrote this constitution together, Honorable Mangwana. We must. And when we wrote it for the weak. We wrote it for the people who are going to be in parliament. We also wrote it for the people who are not going to be in parliament. We wrote it for the majority. We also wrote it for the minority. A constitution is not worth the paper it is written on if it does not protect the minority. Now what my learned friend is saying is that because we are the majority, we can do as we please. That's not the spirit of the constitution. After all, ZANU-PF was not voted by the majority of Zimbabweans. Zimbabwe has 13 million people. ZANU-PF got about 2.6, that's too high. It got 2,300,000 or something like that. Those are the people who thought that ZANU-PF should run their affairs. The majority didn't vote for ZANU-PF. The 11 million people in this country did not vote for your party. Now your party cannot say because we're in parliament, we represent the majority. No, you represent 2 million out of 13 million. It is my respectful submission that the changes of this constitution, ladies and gentlemen, are not called for. This government has more problems to deal with than to change the constitution. These youngsters I see here, I'll be surprised if more than 5 are employed. And I'll be surprised after next year if more than 2 will be employed. That is what we must look at, Honorable Mangwana. That is the conundrum of the Zimbabwean people. That is the pedagogy of the Zimbabwean people. And therefore, that is what we need to look at. This constitution serves us right. This constitution contains the most comprehensive Bill of Rights on the African continent. And as the Americans say, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mwonzora. I was still Googling to find out what conundrum. I'll find it later. Thank you very much for these interesting views from all the three speakers. Now, at this moment, I think we invite questions. Do we have a roving mic, Mr. Maposa? Okay, so I think you can speak loud enough to be heard. We have limited time because I'm also farming public transport, so we shall be brief. Into your questions, if you have a question.